it's hard enough to win one title. To repeat is even harder, but to win 3 in a row, you really have to be on another level. How special and how hard is it to accomplish what you have accomplished?
This year, I think, was the hardest year that, as a program, that we've had yet. And so many people look at the success that we've had and the players that we have and their stats and the things that we've accomplished and would think that this was something that came fairly easy. But when you win the first time, it's awesome. And then you win the second time, and then it becomes that expectation that there's, what else is there? And that three-peat was something that I think we've said in other interviews, and the athletes have said, that was something that we didn't want to focus on, but it was constantly being thrust onto center stage. What about the three-peat? What about the three-peat? Which I think was ultimately combined with the fact that we brought in 8 new freshmen and we were starting 6 of them. Not a whole lot of teams are able to integrate their freshmen into their team in that manner and see results right away. And that's something I think in the earlier part of the season, we were seeing a little bit of those growing pains, and we were trying to figure out how to mesh the new athletes with the vets. And you saw we had those 2 losses on our schedule with Dartmouth and with Central Washington. But ultimately, I think that combined with that plus that added pressure that was saying, all right, well, now we have to focus on the wins, which was something our program never did before. I don't think that my players ever sat down in 2015 or 2016 and said, what's our record? We always just attacked every single game as if it was our last, and that was the mentality. But then we kind of, 2017 crept in, and we started looking at it, and you get nervous when you look at 3-2. That's not a bad record by any means, but it shows that you do have 2 losses for a team that's historically not had that many losses. So I think that this was definitely the hardest one, but it means everything in the world that we were able to come back from that.
Winning 3 national championships in a row, what does that mean for not just the program, but for women's rugby as a whole?
I think it says a lot about how we're growing as a sport. I think that winning those 3 certainly puts a special spotlight on Quinnipiac and what we've been able to accomplish. I think that it really shows that the NCAA game is here and it's not going anywhere. And it's a big statement by our program saying that, I think initially when we won the first one, it was, okay, well, Quinnipiac got a little bit lucky, has some talented players. This is the first national championship. Let's see what happens. And then it was more of a statement when we went out and won the second one. And this time it was like, no, there's absolutely something here of merit, and they are doing their work, and this is a good program. So I think it solidified in a lot of the rugby community's mind that we were absolutely a force to be reckoned with.
Now, it seems that there's a little frustration here, though, with possibly administration, between you, the players, and them. What is the stem of that frustration, would you say?
Well, first, I want to talk about a little bit of the evolution that we're really proud of. If you look at somebody like Taylor Schussler, who you all had interviewed a couple of nights ago, she did a phenomenal job, I thought.
Yeah.
She handled those questions wonderfully, and that's in part to the fact that she's been interviewed all year by the student media and by athletics and had that practice. And Taylor's very well spoken in itself, but if you look at somebody like Taylor, who has been here for 5 years, you go back to 2012, 2013 fall, and the contrast between her experience then and her experience now, it's just night and day. And I think that progress is very hopeful for our program, but also I think there's 2 compartments we're talking about. There's athletic administration, and then there's administration for the rest of the school. The athletic administration has 100% engaged in taking part of being part of that positive resolution and that evolution. Both Greg and Sarah were at the finals. Greg came over to me and shook my hand. Sarah has been at most of our home games and some of our away games. She's been a phenomenal support for us. She's part of the reason we're sitting in this locker room having this interview, along with some other key decision makers within the athletic department. We've seen the pep rally, of course, is being repeated from last year. We're seeing a lot of that. Then there's the other compartment to this, and that's the rest of the upper administration. On social media, you were seeing probably a week, maybe a week or a little less week before the semifinals, you saw our president in the locker room with the men's basketball team for the Dartmouth game, and then again for the Brown game, which means that athletics is important to the administration. Then the night before our semifinals, you see a tweet go out by the university of President Leahy walking down the steps at the ice hockey event, and it said, you know, there's no better relationship between the president and its students, and it was a very liked and retweeted tweet, which was awesome. But I don't think that the entire population feels that way, and when there was a national championship that was right in their own backyard and we didn't see that, I think that was a little bit disappointing. But I think that my athletes are at that point, and one of my athletes even said to me, she said they were discussing it about why he showed up to the basketball games and wished them well, but did not show up to ours. And she said, I just don't care anymore. I want people there that want to be there, not just because it's a political statement. So I'm okay, which to me, those are my athletes and that's how they feel, and I will support them.
Let me ask you, why do you think that's the case? That there isn't this support from the administration outside of athletic administration, that not at the games, even though it's right in its backyard, but they'll go to, whether it's California or Florida, until the tournament games, conference tournament games, but they're not showing up to the rugby games. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I think if you had an opportunity to ask, I think that would be...
If you had to pinpoint it though, if you just talking with your players, why do you think that might be the case?
I'm not sure, but we talk about this all the time just in general with our players and the lessons that we learn about right and wrong. And I think in general, and I just actually did a podcast a few weeks ago with John Alba to talk about the appropriate ways in which athletes, like the athlete up at Maine, had actually approached the administration and said, hey, I think that we need to re-examine the fairness on a level between softball and baseball. That administration responded very positively and said, you know what, you're right. Do I think that that happens all over the country in a typical fashion? No. I think there is a general sense, just in general, I think there's a general sense that when we're told that we're not doing something, that the immediate thing is to be offended, rather to embrace the idea that perhaps we could do something differently. And then when we're told several times and it shows up in the media and we're chastised in the media and you're seeing it tweeted out and people are calling you out, there's two ways to go. There's a way to react to that, and there's a way to say, yes, you are right, I support this, I was wrong. And then there's another way to say, I will completely dismiss it. So those are the two avenues that were of the choice.
How annoying is it though when you see upper administration go to games and root for the teams when those teams might not even be that successful, whereas you guys not only have won 1 or 2 national championships, but 3 in a row, which is unprecedented, especially at this school.
Right. I would say less annoying than hurtful, but I think, again, this is all part of that learning process. And if we look at the small victories of what we have had when we actually sat down with even the student media in 2013 and said, hey, here's the comparison of what's being covered. Could you throw us a bone? And look where we are sitting right now. And this is an incredible evolution. We're more about celebrating those than we are about throwing so much thought into being hurt over something that we probably may not change. It may not, but we're hopeful because of the evolution that we've made with athletics and the evolution we've made with the student media, and that someday that will change. But I would say it's more hurtful, but at the same time, I want to take into account what my student athletes want to focus on, and right now they want to focus on the fact that they're very proud of themselves, and they should be. You
said Greg Amodio went up to you after the game, shook your hand. Mm-hmm. Was there maybe an email or a phone call from President Leahy or anything in person that you received any recognition or congratulations?
No, we did not. Hopefully there will be some type of appearance or an attempt that's made at the pep rally, but we did not receive anything. Was President Leahy at the pep rally last year? No. So 2 years ago, there was the email sent out, if I'm correct. Sure. Last year, the pep rally, this year, is that kind of what you want to see, or is there anything else, maybe come out at halftime of a basketball game or an intermission of a hockey game, anything like that? Sarah has been working with us, and as well as Nick over in marketing, to have us honored at a basketball game. And in 2015 and 16, it was more so a tradition and suggested that these are the options for you to come out at the halftime for basketball. And I think the idea of even hockey was presented, which I think is great. This year, we want to shake it up a little bit, and because the women's basketball team has been so enormously successful, we want to bring more attention to their program, and if it's possible by combining that honoring ceremony at halftime, we want to do that with the women's basketball team. And athletics has granted that to us, and we're so incredibly grateful. So that will be somewhere in the spring, because we wanted to maximize the attendance for women's basketball in addition to celebrating ours, because we think that they deserve that too. So we're a little out of the box there too, because it's typically a men's event that you get that.
Let me ask, rugby being in the NIRA, does that have anything to do, you think, with the fact that there might not be that recognition from upper administration, that it's not a MAC team or an ECAC school? Does that have anything to do with it, you think?
I'm glad that you asked that, because I do want to address that. I want to say, when we went through a bit of the conflict and resolution stages about the coverage part of it, that was a very frequent rebuttal or response from people. We took a picture of our trophy, we put it on Twitter, and someone tweeted back and said, that's not an NCAA championship trophy. There's only X number of teams, you're not technically national champions. And what I say to that is that there are 17 teams in this country that compete at the NCAA level. The place that our sport is at is where every single sport that is on this campus and other campuses anywhere that's in the NCAA has gone through. Those sports were fortunate enough to go through their infancy at a very different time, probably at a time when many of the coaches, even here at Quinnipiac and in a lot of places, can't even remember. Because if I were to ask you who won the first pre-collegiate soccer women's championship, you probably couldn't tell me.
Right.
Our athletes are very much aware of what their pool looks like. They're very, very much aware that that trophy is not an NCAA championship trophy. We're incredibly aware of the teams that we play against, which are all NCAA teams, but we do play Penn State, which is a higher level elite club team. They understand those things. It doesn't take away from the 6 days a week. It doesn't take away from their strength and conditioning. It doesn't take away from the experience and the experiences that they're having and what they've given back to this institution and representing the institution. Not to mention the fact that this institution went to extra lengths to prove that we were just like everybody else via court case. So in that regard, I don't believe that that should be a reason, because we are an NCAA emerging sport. We still count. Our participation still counts. And that part of it, I think, is kind of that what about that people usually bring up. Oh, well, do you think it's because you don't have 40? If they said that to basketball and soccer and lacrosse and tennis, they probably wouldn't be where they were, because you need to celebrate the building as much as you need to celebrate the finish line. That's the biggest part of this.
Does it go on at other rugby schools, do you think? I mean, have you talked to Dartmouth's coach or Central Washington's coach, Norwich's, about their teams not getting the recognition from upper administration or from the school itself?
I think that's a really hard question. I know that there is discussions amongst just the treatment in general of women's rugby programs in this country. And I think that is a conversation that when I have these individual conversations with those coaches and they talk about, well, we're not really treated the same, or, well, we're really low on the totem pole. My question is, have you asked your athletes how they feel? There's a whole lot that this generation of athletes won't talk to you about if you ask them. I think as coaches and even in the rugby space, there's a sense, because our sport is in its infancy, that you need to wait your turn. Like, there's other sports that go before you. There's other sports that are more established. I think in general, that's not the best lesson. I think that if there's an inequity and you recognize that and you talk about it and it is grossly unfair and sometimes even mildly unfair, I think that having that conversation with your athletes is worth it. But I'm not sure that conversation is happening. There's plenty of dialogue saying, yeah, we don't have any of that. None of this came easy. None of this came easy.
As a coach, is it hard talking about the president not recognizing your team because he is the president of the school and you are a coach? Is it difficult to talk about this?
Yeah, I would say it was. I think in the beginning, because it was such a raw subject for our program, and as we grew and exploded over the last 4 or 5 seasons and have really just achieved success since we've been a program, save for the very, very first year. I think that it was a topic that was more easily discussed because it hadn't been brought out into the open. But because it has been brought out into the open and it has been talked about and it has been addressed and it has been discussed on a very public platform in many cases and in the newspaper and within the student media, I think it makes it now, it's become more difficult because you have so many questions about just why not? Why? That part of it. So I think that in the interim, it was, all right, well, we haven't breached this subject before. We haven't actually dug into it. But now that we have, and we've been vocal and we've asked and we've waited and it hasn't happened, I think that part of it makes it a lot harder. It's just kind of this open wound. But like I was saying before, my players are happy. They are strong. They appreciate every opportunity that they have. And I think it's somewhere in the background. And I think that's a sad thing, for that to be in the background, where you get to the point where it doesn't even matter. Those things do matter, but I think it's a point where you're almost numb to it.
If you had a meeting with President Leahy or anyone in upper administration, what exactly would you say to them?
It's a really good one. If I were to have a meeting with the president or upper administration, to those people that have not been present throughout this process, I would say that there are 23 female athletes that represent and wear Quinnipiac rugby across the front of their jersey every weekend. They wear it every day in the hallway. They wear it around campus. Their expectation is that everyone that works at this university is proud of them. And the absence of the upper administration at an event like the national championship or even the semifinals or even a home game, for that matter, speaks volumes about the constituency that we feel has value at this university. And that I'm sorry that they were not able to witness that level of greatness, that level of accomplishment, and that they missed out on knowing 23 of the most amazing young women at this institution.